Hi, enjoy some fresh air with me for a little while by the garden. I'll talk a bit about ADHD today. As something I learned yesterday, a bit of a rabbit hole, I found a simple way to explain something reasonably complex that brings a big understanding around why ADHD brains find cognitive functioning so difficult to access. Why we find ourselves procrastinating, getting lost, not finding motivation, and also how this correlates with depression. And there's an understanding between the two. Oh, beautiful blackbird. Understanding between the two, which really made some sense to me last night, and I want to share it with you. So, first of all, I want to talk a bit about depression in terms of antidepressants and SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Depression is caused by a lack of serotonin in the system in terms of it's being produced, and this is where it got interesting. Imagine it this way: you've got two neurons, right? It's like these tiny little neurons in the brain, and one's producing it. And I'm going to do it this way. This one's producing it, and this one's consuming it. And they're like micromillimeters in the brain, but there's like a gap between them. One produces it, and the other one takes it up. And I was imagining this like a parent feeding a child and putting the dinner on the table in the middle. And the parent going, "Here's your dinner," and the child going, normally, "Thank you, I'm hungry," eating it. They're happy. They've eaten. But with depression, it's like something's not feeling right in the world. There's some situation where we're not feeling happy, safe, secure, and we're not having fun. There's a lot of things going on that are overwhelming and stressful. And the child under stress does not eat, right? So the parent's putting food on the table and the child's thinking, well, I'm not hungry yet, right? But when they come back for it, the parent hasn't left it on the table. They've taken it back and go, well, if you're not hungry, you're not eating. And now they literally go hungry. And this is kind of how I was imagining it. So serotonin is produced. If this one doesn't consume it quickly enough and it's delayed, then the parent neuron takes it back. Now, parent neuron is not a technical term that I know of. It's how I'm choosing to explain it to you today. And it's very much like if you put food on a table but it doesn't get eaten, it will go off and become toxic. And there is a reason why it gets cleared up and taken away. It doesn't just sit there. So it gets produced, what's not used gets reconsumed, repurposed, recooked, reheated, turned into another meal, whatever, and then put back out on the table for another meal. But in the meantime, if the child's food timing is not in time with what's being served and taken, they're going to go without. And that leads to longer term depression rather than momentary. So we get those times when we're watching the news and go, oh, this is depressing. And we can make the decision to turn the news off so we can make a change and life goes back to normal. But when life itself around us is causing that depression and we can't switch it off like the television, that's when we need to find ways to create that serotonin naturally, called work-life balance, or creating a life balance. And if we're not creating that balance in life, then we start to get this this serotonin deficit. And so SSRIs slow down the timing of the reuptake and give the child neuron, as it is in this situation, more chance to consume the serotonin before any leftovers are cleared up. So it's like, oh yeah, we'll leave it on the table in a half an hour or whatever, and if you haven't eaten by then we're going to clear it up, but then it's closer to next meal time. So it was just a simple way of kind of imagining this process going on as like feeding time at a family table. Now, what's the difference between that and ADHD with a dopamine deficit? And this, chucking it down my rain now. This is where it got interesting, in that dopamine deficit, very much like the serotonin, is being produced. So it's not a deficit in production. It can be if there is not a situation in life that's allowing it to be produced, but then it gets to a point where this one becomes sluggish and is not consuming it when it's there, or needs more time to consume to rebuild stores and rebuild energy until they find a natural rhythm again. But dopamine deficit is slightly different. And there are precursors to dopamine as well, which I'd kind of heard of, but I learned a little bit more about it. And there's something called levodopa, or levodopamine, which is, as we know, dopamine seeking is like we do actions to seek dopamine, and dopamine is the reward hormone. Like, yes, I got it, or I met that person, or I achieved that, or I finally got to eat my dinner. And when we're playing games, all those little noises and rewards that go off feed dopamine, which is why gaming can be quite addictive, along with many other things. So addiction is kind of dopamine seeking caught in a loop. I mean, that's not saying all addiction is dopamine seeking. There are other reasons as well. But there is this dopamine seeking through activity. Doing something we love again and again and again can lead to addiction. But for other people, it can be a hobby like sewing or woodwork or some gardening, where doing it makes them feel good, right? And everybody's got their way of seeking dopamine, unique to them. That there's millions of possibilities. But when it comes to actually seeking the dopamine, the levodopamine is the part that says, okay, we need dopamine, let's go and find it. So there's this precursor, which is the action-taking hormone. Now, if that is not present enough, or it is being, there's two aspects to this. One is the levodopamine, if it's not being produced sufficiently enough, is not creating action. So we have this deficit in action initiation. And that's where people go, oh, I know I've got something on later, but until it comes urgent, I'm just in paralysis, like task paralysis, until it's a deadline. And then it starts to bring in the levodopamine to get you into action. So the question is how we can initiate that levodopamine earlier without it becoming a task deadline. And there are various different ways with body doubling and deadlines, but when you're on your own, you haven't got anyone to body double with you, you haven't got a deadline, and this is where washing up gets used as a big example. If no one's coming over and no one's there to talk to you while you do it, it just sits there. Because we haven't got the hormones to get us into action mode in the first place. And so there's a lot of work to do around emotional awareness in what gets us into that state of taking action when we're missing the body doubling and the deadlines. Now, there are ways, and it's still not 100% consistent for me at the moment, but it's definitely making some difference in how I take action on these, in how I motivate myself, and it's still a work in progress. But this is different anyway. So looking at the dopamine part itself is when we're dopamine seeking, this is the next section. So first of all, we've got to have the levodopamine to get into action, to seek dopamine. And then the dopamine itself can be produced in sufficient quantity, but there's an extra layer to this, is that apparently in an ADHD brain, where we talked about a parent and child neuron, there are things called neurotransporters, right? Which I think is a similar thing, is one's feeding the dopamine, and the other one, instead of going, oh, I'm not hungry yet, is going, oh, good, I'm hungry. But this one's feeding it and taking it back so quickly, but there is a density of neurotransporters that is higher in a neurodivergent brain or an ADHD brain, where there are more transmitters taking it back up than to receive it. So they're working over efficiently, and this poor little one over here that is hungry is like, come to the feasting table, and like, oh, there's food, but before they can grab it, everybody else has grabbed it first. And you're like, oh, I really wanted that. And so you're going without the dopamine in terms of the dopamine deficit is not lack of in terms of being produced, but it's lack of ability to utilize it in the right way in the right time. And so we need even more of it to try and overcome these hungry neurotransporters, so that the neurons over here get an opportunity to consume as well, and actually create the actions they need from there, or the motivation. And so it's a very complex topic, but it was just looking at this concept of where SSRIs slow down the uptake for over here. It explains a lot of the addictions or the dopamine seeking behavior in ADHD. Like why we need this constant input and sensory activation and things to overcome these deficits. And also how we have to look at it slightly differently to overcome the challenges of ADHD versus the challenges that come with depression. How we rebuild our emotional awareness around these. Give ourselves some self-compassion, some forgiveness, and build in the personal development strategies around our individual needs. Not just a generic one-size-fits-all, this is how you motivate yourself, because it doesn't work the same for everybody. Now, with an autistic brain, it worked differently than with an OCD brain, than with an ADHD brain. And if somebody's got a combination of 2 or 3 or more, and then we've got bipolar and other neurodiversities as well, right, everyone's going to have different reactions. But even beginning to understand this explains why, first of all, people who have neurodiversity, or people who are neurodivergent, because neurodiversity includes neurotypical, but people who are neurodivergent have a higher difference in how their body produces and reuptakes hormones that are required for a healthy emotional cycle. Now that's my expertise, is the emotional cycle, and how we need to keep our emotional cycle. They're going to get noisy, let me shut the door. There's been a lot of F-35s flying around here recently, making a lot of noise. So there's a lot of differences in how they produce and reutilize the hormones. And these hormones are all what drive our emotional states, that drive the emotional cycle. And the emotional cycle is the bit that I understand in why it is important that we move through it, not get stuck in it. And people who are neurodivergent get stuck with certain parts of the emotional cycle because of these synapses either misfiring or not producing or not consuming or reuptaking before consumption. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the neurocircuitry, and that's why it's neurodiversity. This makes sense when we really think about it. And so understanding the emotional cycle gives us a chance to say, okay, well, our body produces these hormones based on our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, our actions, our reactions, our interactions. And when we understand our own patterns, our own beliefs, and our own thoughts, and we learn to regulate emotions and reactions through awareness, it takes away some of the emotional dysregulation that goes with the neurodysregulation, right? Or the neurodifferences. And it makes sense why people without the emotional awareness find that these hormonal differences happening in their body because of the neurodifferences creates, but every hormone creates an emotional reaction. So when you're doing something and the hormones go, oh, let's flood this particular hormone in, and the emotion just follows it. Whether it's like overexcitement and just, hey, hi everybody, I'm in the room, or, oh, I've really had a bad day, or threatening people because they've just merely said hello to you, like, how dare you talk to me today, right? This is all the emotional dysregulation at varying levels. You know, everybody's got their own unique pattern around this, their own unique artistic style of being emotionally present. But understanding it actually begins to help regulate it. And when we start to regulate it from an emotional standpoint, it also starts to regulate how our body produces those hormones. And it's not an overall cure, but it makes a significant difference. And that is why I teach emotional awareness. Now, for me, it began from the opposite end of this journey, learning about emotions first. But the more I learn about the neurodiversity, and the more I learn about autism and ADHD, in particular, those two are my more key topics for me. The more I learn about them, the more it makes sense about why the emotional awareness works, in how learning about that empowers us to make enough changes to be able to live and function with the neurodiversity that we have. Now, there is not saying this is an overall cure, but it's a significant difference. And I've seen it not only in me, the changes it's made in me, learning this for myself. I have seen the difference it made in my son. And that's where this began, was developing this to help him, was developing my emotional cycle diagram to help him understand his emotions. And he went within a couple of months from 3-hour pits of depression frequently over a space that had been prolonged over a space of 12 years, to within a couple of months ringing me up and saying, I talked myself out of one today in 10 minutes. Now, it wasn't an instant cure, there was still a long way to go, and it's still, even another 15 years on, a learning process for him. But he is much more emotionally regulated today than I ever could have dreamed of back then. And I've also seen the difference it's made for me, the difference it's made for others, and now even helping my grandchildren. It's working into the next generation too. So if you want to know more about this, there are different ways to check this out with me about emotional awareness, how we can help regulate those hormones through understanding, how we can build in patterns of thoughts, feelings and behavior that support a healthy lifestyle and a balanced lifestyle with purpose around your personal needs, because everybody's unique, right? Telling anybody this doesn't create a one-size-fits-all solution. Everybody's strategies have to work for them as an individual. Me saying, you've all got to do this, and if it helps one person but irritates the hell out of another, it's pointless. So that's why I like to work with people on a one-to-one basis as well. So ways that you can find out more about working with me. First of all, there's my books on Amazon, specifically Brain Unchained, the book I wrote to help my son, particularly teenagers, young adults, and those parenting teens and young adults. Brain Unchained is a great starting point as a book. It's a work style book that takes you through the emotional cycle diagram to learn emotional regulation. From there, from the parenting side, there are courses on my website, which is kayreeve.co.uk. Beyond that, anybody wants to work with me one-on-one, get in touch. I do workshops roughly once every month as well. I put those on Eventbrite. You can find a link to that from my website or through my social media pages. But you can find my social media pages through my website. Connect with me on there as well, or on YouTube. Or join the newsletter as well. If you join the newsletter on the website, you'll get updates on upcoming workshops there as well. On top of that, I'm looking more into leadership style of support now as well, where I'm going to have a self-leadership group for those who want to learn the emotional regulation for themselves as adults, as maybe it's self-employed in a leadership position, possibly with neurodiversity themselves as well. It's not a given. It could be somebody who wants to learn about it to support others at work. But the Inner State Circle self-leadership group is going to be starting as soon as I get enough people together to create the cohort to kick us off with this program. And it'll be a weekly meeting on a Wednesday evening. Let me know if you want to know about that. Beyond that, I'm offering one-to-one coaching as well, one-to-one mentoring. For that one, message me and ask for a strategy call. Right? Ask for a strategy call, and we will look at how we can take that into emotional intelligence training at this level. This goes a whole different level, where we take you from that emotional awareness, like learning how to manage your own emotional dysregulation or support teens and young adults at parenting, and we take it into understanding it from a leadership perspective. So you learn the emotional awareness, personal development, we recover some of that. A lot of it you'll know, but it definitely brings more awareness to it. So it makes more sense why these things work. And then we look at empathy skills, leadership skills, and change management skills, all building up in levels of emotional intelligence around the emotional cycle and understanding the impact it has on everyday actions, reactions, and interactions with staff, clients, contractors, suppliers, management teams, anybody who's involved in your business at a small to medium-sized company level. I'm looking towards doing corporate as well, but at the moment more small to medium size. So it's a growth process for me as well. I'm not exactly dress leadership style today. I'm recovering from a few days of a chest infection, so hence I was sitting here enjoying the fresh air. Now the planes are gone. It's still raining, but now the planes are gone. Let's have some fresh air again. All good for the health. So there's different ways to reach out to me and work with me. But I hope today has made some sense for you around the difference between depression, ADHD, and given some insight to why learning emotional awareness is a powerful factor, either in your personal, family, or leadership life. Thank you for listening in today. I've really enjoyed discovering this little bit extra this week and bringing this to you in a way that I hope feeds some sense into understanding neurodiversity and emotions. Take care, everybody, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more information, because now I'm rebranding into Hidden Path Leadership. It's still an ongoing process at the moment, but there will be a lot more coming back to this channel in the near future. Bye-bye.